The Mediterranean Sea, the island of Crete, 15th century BC. One of archaeology's greatest mysteries is the disappearance of Atlantis, the legendary lost continent. No trace of this extinct civilization has ever been found, yet the legend endures. Many archaeologists think that the myth of Atlantis is in some way connected to another great civilization, that of the Minoans. The Minoan civilization, which flourished in Crete in the 3rd and 2nd millennia BC, in parallel with the more famous Egyptian civilization, did not have the privilege of ending up in the history books of the ancients because it disappeared so suddenly, just like Atlantis. The association of Atlantis with Crete and the Minoans is supported by recent discoveries emerging from excavations, discoveries that reveal a highly advanced civilization, unequaled for centuries, a civilization which enjoyed a long golden age. Come with us as we explore the amazing ancient civilization of the Minoans. In ancient civilizations from the 2nd and 3rd millennia BC, it is the Egyptians who occupy the limelight for their dazzling sculpture and art, the hieroglyphics they left behind, the royal tombs, and the incredible architecture, including, of course, the pyramids. In the Egypt of those times, merchants traded exquisitely beautiful vases, now known as chimeras. It was said they came from an island in the middle of the Mediterranean, a rich, sweet, and peaceful island, a paradise. The description enticed many Egyptians who wanted to visit. Travelers would change boats in various ports as they moved up the coasts of Lebanon, Cyprus, and the islands of the southern Aegean. One of the first remarkable sights they would encounter was Mount Ida, 8,058 feet high, in the middle of the island of Crete. In the 2nd millennium BC, Crete was the center of a vast domain that encompassed most of the islands in the Aegean. For this reason, the Minoan civilization, named after Minos, the legendary king of Crete, was also called the Aegean civilization. On the south coast of Crete, archaeologists found traces of a Minoan settlement, Aia Triata. The excavation work unearthed a huge villa and one unusual object among the many relics found. Its painted sides depict a procession. The figures in line are all smiling, serene, and joyful. The object, however, is indisputably a sarcophagus, and the procession, in spite of its apparent happiness, can only be a funeral procession. By studying images and artifacts left by the Minoans, archaeologists discovered that everything on Crete, even a funeral, was related to joy and nature, an ode to life. This contrasted sharply with the seriousness of Egyptian funerals with their rigid cult of the dead. Archaeologists also found these stone vases at Aia Triata, carved from black steatite, one of antiquity's most beautiful materials. The images on the ancient vases tell us of the world in which they lived. One character, proud and handsome, attracted the attention of scholars who sought to understand who he might be. The solution to the puzzle could not be found in any written histories. The information left to us by ancient historians is imperfect anyway, since it's based on legend and not direct observation. The only narrative we have of Crete and the Minoans is the legendary story of King Minos, whose description matches quite closely with the character depicted on the steatite vase. The resemblance is so strong that many have declared it is in fact an image of the king. Perhaps the only Minoan image of Minos that exists is found on this vase. The great legend tells of a monstrous figure, the Minotaur, half man, half bull, born of the union of a white bull with Pasiphae, King Minos's wife. Upon seeing their hideous offspring, the king had the Minotaur locked up in a labyrinth. Every 9 years, Minos would feed 7 young men and women from Athens to the Minotaur. Eventually, Theseus, the son of the king of Athens, decides to kill the Minotaur. On his way, he meets Ariadne, the daughter of Minos, who falls in love with him. Ariadne gives Theseus a ball of silken twine to unspool as he enters the maze so he can find his way out. Theseus kills the Minotaur and escapes the island, taking Ariadne with him. Minos, in a rage, locks up the designer of the maze, Daedalus, but he too escapes, along with his ill-fated son, Icarus, on waxen wings. It would seem then that a dark cloud hangs over the Cretan world. But archaeologists warn us to distrust histories invented by one people to account for their enemies. The legend of the Minotaur was written by the ancient Greeks, and the Greeks were the enemies of the Minoans. The Minoans cannot defend themselves against such accusations. Their writing still remains undecipherable. Their alphabet, the so-called Linear A, is a puzzle, and one of modern archaeology's major challenges lies on a Minoan ceramic disc, the Phaistos disc. When it was found in Phaistos, archaeologists were intrigued by its spiral markings. But unlike the readable glyphs left by the Egyptians, these markings left by the Minoans remain an enigma for modern scholars. In spite of this, the disc reveals something quite extraordinary. The markings are printed, not painted, and each one represents a syllable. The disc thus contains a text, one of the first printed texts in human history, thousands of years before Gutenberg. Toward the end of the 1800s, an English archaeologist, Arthur Evans, found these dusty, interesting seals at an Athens antique market. He discovered that they had come from Crete and decided to dig there at Knossos. He began to discover the remains of elaborate and finely decorated dwellings. The floors of the houses were perfectly stacked, one having collapsed onto the other as if an earthquake or similar catastrophe had suddenly struck the city. Evans rebuilt everything that could be put back together, but the more he dug, the more he realized how strange the buildings were.